How about now? Do we have audio? Check, 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 check. 1, 2. Are you hearing me now? Hearing me now. Okay, great. All right, folks. Last night when I was out, we suffered a power outage here, and I didn't realize that it had partially taken down my entire studio. So while everything looked hunky-dory, here we are. So I apologize for the exceptionally late start. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I, of course, am Bill Sylvie, a.k.a. the Dungeon Delver, doing everything by mouse right now because my stream box is still down, too, and that outrages me. That outrages me. I'm angry about that. I'm angry about a lot of things, or am I? But folks, it's time we had a discussion about things. It's time we talked about outrage, and I figured I couldn't do this alone. This was actually the suggestion of my guest today. He is a buddy of mine. He has the patience of a saint because he has not blipped off, or maybe he's just waiting to tell me how angry he is at me. But we're gonna talk about things today, he and I, hopefully, and I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. But before I do, this live stream, of course, is brought to you by our friends at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde makes the kind of adventures they'd like to play, whether it's for 5th edition, Castles and Crusades, or for the OSR. Old School is in play at the table with Hellebarde Games, and you can find them on DriveThruRPG or on their own website, hellebardegames.com. Link is in the description below. So, Wonderful Wizard of Games is not late. Thank you very much for the super, Venger. My anger makes me stronger. You're not late because of a power outage I had last night. So, anyway, I was a little exasperated, GM Jocko, about the audio issue, about my 48-volt mic deciding it was sleepy time, about the fact that my Stream Deck is still not working again. But somebody else to be here and yell at things with me, or maybe not, we'll see, is a guy I've had on the show before. He plays D&D with us on Tuesday nights. He is Tarth Nose Rage, and he's an all-around swell dude. So everybody, let's welcome him to the show. Everybody say heyo to Timothy Imholt.
Hello, everybody.
How are you, my friend?
Good. And I'd just like to point out to Death Angel's Shadow that, yes, fear leads to hate, hate leads to anger, anger leads to suffering. But if you ask Yoda too many questions, he just gives up and dies.
That is 100% correct. And proof positive that Yoda had teenage children that we never saw.
Exactly.
Yes. But anyway, I want to start this off because Thane Kyle here, Ricky Maru, really kind of stole our thunder, and I'm mad about that. That it makes me enraged. But no, discourse is a powerful tool. Rage is blinding. And When I started this program, a little bit of background about me, and I've told Tim about this, but if you're new to the show, if you've just subscribed, when I started this, I just talked about cool D&D things, and then my channel kind of, and I didn't really do much with YouTube, but I started streaming over on Facebook when the human malware was unleashed. And I said to the people, I said, keep your chins up. Here's how you can keep gaming online. I'll talk to you if you just need a human voice to hear, if you're shut up in your house. And last January, a curious thing happened. Wizards accidentally did the entire OGL, and they were screwing things up at a rate of literally literally 3 times a week, and it was coming out, and I was reporting on it. And they did it for the majority of 2023. But there were times when they didn't. And there were times when I would look at my metrics and I'd say, wow, nobody's watching the channel. And I would try to report on things that I thought were interesting, but were really just not all that interesting. And I'd look at my fellow YouTubers, not the folks that I know intimately, but people who were kind of riding that wave of interest in tabletop hobbies. And there was a lot of rage bait about things that were going on. And I thought about that and I was like, Wizard said today the sky over Renton was blue. Does this mean Wizards hates the color green? And a 10-minute video about that. And I tried to keep up with that a little bit, but I also tried to keep it stuff that you guys would be interested in. And I found out the two are very divergent. And that if I wanted to go this way and keep talking about actual news, I could do it. But if I wanted to go this way and just make constant outrage bait, I couldn't. I couldn't. And so back when I had the birthday live stream, I said, guys, I'm not going to do, if Wizard screws up, I will genuinely make a video about a Wizard screw up, but I'm not going to be these other channels. And so Tim and I started talking about that. And here's where I do the handoff in the backfield to Tim and give him the ball, because Tim, I want to hear your input about this.
So for anybody who doesn't know, I'm actually in the social media business, not from owning a platform or from producing content. I have a company that tracks sort of the algorithms, and we have tools that help you kind of get your message seen. And one of the things I find interesting is everybody's like, oh, you got to come out and be angry or be, whatever, blow things up, because that's what works for Mr. Beast. And whether that's metaphorical or actual is another story. But we started digging into the various algorithms, the dreaded algorithm that may or may not ever let your message be seen. And what we find is that the systems, the algorithms themselves, like the rage for momentarily. They like it briefly. They like it in small windows. But then what happens is the algorithms, especially on X and here on YouTube, look at accounts that have been reported, blocked, screen, they look at those sorts of things and say, okay, we're going to take our timeline and we're not going to give these guys placement anymore. So you'll see then people come on and go, oh my God, I've been shadow banned. Well, no, the algorithm doesn't like people getting pissed off at you, because social media companies, whether it's X or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, their entire job in life is to make sure you stay on their platform and don't go somewhere else. That's it. That's all they care about, is how much more time can you spend on YouTube versus on X or versus on, NBC or Max or Netflix or wherever. They want you to stay on longer and longer and longer so they can increase their ad revenue. So if you rage bait, you might get a momentary spike, but then what you get is your channel gets sort of deprioritized. It sort of doesn't get the placement on people's timeline it used to get. And then the people go out there and say, oh, complain, oh, I'm being shadow banned. Well, no, what you're doing is waiting for the algorithm to reset and say, okay, you haven't been blocked or complained about in a while, so I'll give you placement again. So I think what we have forgotten, and what some influencers, whether it's here or wherever, have done is said, oh, I can grow quickly by being pissed off, and I can grow instantaneously by being pissed off. But what we find in my business space, and Bill, you've probably seen it, people will subscribe while you're angry, but they don't ever come back, right? They don't ever look, they don't ever interact. And yes, I see accounts with millions of followers, but if you look at their engagement rate, it's like 0.0001%. And for an account to be effective, for a social media account to be truly effective, whether you're just trying to get word out about something, whether you're playing D&D, or whether or not you just want to talk to like-minded people, engagement is what matters. It's social media. You should be social, and you should have that chance to socialize. And if what you want to do is come on and yell at people, that's not really socializing. That's just soapbox shouting, which there's a place for that. But It certainly is something that doesn't really bring people back. And I see RPG Grandma says, yes, there are people on X who rage bait, but X has recently changed their algorithm greatly to where it's starting to deprioritize people who are blocked and are reported. So those people who do come on and complain and scream and yell, as people block and report them, their timeline placement goes down a lot. So they may have a lot of followers and they may spike up quickly, but if you mute them or ignore them, which I do, or I block them, they stop getting prioritized. So like my rule on X is very simple. I will talk to anybody. I've got 12,000 followers. I may not get a chance to report or respond to every comment, but I respond to as many as I can. And I will have conversations with people. But I had somebody the other day on a post I made about a series of books by John Norman, the Gore series of books, who got really mad at me and told me, I'm just not looking at it right. You must just hate people in this community. And I'm like, I don't hate them. I just found these books, I didn't like them. And I kind of came out and said why I didn't like them. And he told me, well, you're just a hater. I'm like, no, I just stated a preference. I did not care for this series of books. And I explained why. And he told me if I didn't support the books, he was going to do whatever it was. And I blocked the guy. Right. So that guy's account, not only does it not get sort of a bigger voice because it's responding on mine, which is kind of larger, but it also deprioritizes him on other people's timelines. So if he goes off and tries to start to post stuff that, whatever it is he's trying to have the message heard of, he's not going to get as good placement. So I think but the reason people do that, and I think the reason people try to become influencers and try to get these larger accounts is my PhD is in physics. So we're going to go into psychology for a minute. And I actually had to talk to psychologists to figure this one out. So bear with me a second, because I'm usually the guy you call when you have broken math, not broken brain cells. So the psychologist said, humans love dopamine, and you get a quick dopamine rush by getting 50 new followers, 100 new followers, 1,000 new followers, or a bunch of comments or a bunch of likes. That gives you a dopamine rush, but it's quick, and then it goes away. And then you look for another one and a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And what things like playing Dungeons and Dragons, sitting around and talking with your friends, reading a book, the things that does is it allows you to have a dopamine hit, a smaller level of dopamine over a longer period of time, which is actually healthy for you. And what these shorter dopamine hits do, that people are looking for that instant gratification that you, by the way, flash games on your phone are designed to give you those brief bits of dopamine. That's kind of what they do. What it's done, what those quick hits of dopamine do that we then start to search for in larger and larger quantities, lead to things like narcissism. And I would firmly say that in the last 10 years, I think one of the things we can all agree on is that the narcissism rate in the United States has gone from here to, significantly bigger than it used to be. No, Flash is not so used, but you know what I'm talking about. Just the quick little games on your phone. Sorry, I use Flash games because I'm old and it was what they were at the start.
Hey, I still say Flash games, man.
So anyway, but that's kind of where this whole thing comes from. Is as humans, we like dopamine. We want dopamine. It makes us feel good. But it doesn't necessarily lead to good things if we do it wrong. And what things like this have done, and what things like social media have done, is it said, here's a quick hit. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Go find more. And I live in a part of Dallas that has, it's got 2 restaurants that are rated as the ones to be seen at, which of course I never go to because I don't care about being seen anywhere. I just want good food. But you'll see people go there and they'll like take their picture outside and get just the camera angle right and everything else. And I'm like, okay, good for you. And then they throw it on Instagram, and of course they get 53 likes, or my favorite is, because I live very close to the Dallas Cowboy practice field. And you will occasionally see Lamborghini, Ferrari, high-end sports cars parked out there. And the number of people that go out and pose next to the car, and I'm sure the caption reads, "Oh, just going out for a little ride," right? It's not your car. It's not. It's just parked there. But the number of people that run by to get their picture taken with the expensive car and then run off is just hilarious to me. And I know those pop up online with different captions than they should, because it's not yours. And even the valets there will shoo people away quickly, but sometimes they don't catch them all. But I think that's where we've kind of gotten as a society, and why I think this rage stuff works, because people get those quick likes, they get that interaction, they get people to say, "Oh, you're right," and they jump on a bandwagon. And it's what's it going to do long run or long term? It's going to kind of mess everything up. So I think collectively as a society, if Tim got to make rules for a minute, I would probably look for ways to encourage people to look for smaller levels of dopamine over extended period of time. And that's kind of what I try to do online is I try to go off and find ways to get people to read more. Like my whole channel is about reading books and what's good and what's not and other stuff. And if you want to get a picture with a beat up El Camino, I think it means you watched Breaking Bad one too many times.
My take on it, as a guy who watches a lot of car resto videos on YouTube, is that it means you acknowledge how much better Big Iron is than shiny new plastic.
Oh, absolutely. So for people that don't know, I'm 52 years old. I'm divorced. I am the CTO of a company. And, when you get to that age, you're kind of at the midlife crisis stage. I'm going to put that in air quotes because I don't call it a crisis. I call it, I have no female adult supervision. I can do what I want. Anyway, I have a son who's getting a driver's license relatively soon. And I keep telling him, oh, man, I really look forward to you getting your license. And he keeps asking me, he's like, he was excited about that for a while. And then he goes, wait, why? Because he saw something coming, right? I was like, well, gee, then I can get you a nice 4-door car and you can drive your brother and sister around and I don't have to. And he's like, what does that mean? I was like, that means I'm going to go get a 78 Z28 with T-tops and see how fast I can get a ticket or run out of gas, both of which are probably pretty fast. Daniel, who divorced me? Well, that would be an engineer that I will not discuss, because apparently scientists and engineers should never come close to each other because one always views themselves as superior to the other and the engineer is wrong. I'm kidding. That was not what led to my divorce. I don't want to go into what happened there, but it was probably a good thing. Hey, Mark, my first car was a 280Z 2+2, so I'm with you on that. One of my first cars. My first car was a 76 baby blue Pinto. My first car that I will claim credit to was a 280ZX 2+2.
Yeah, my first car was a Chrysler LeBaron of the K car variant. One of those Iacocca specials.
Oh yes, you could pass anything. See, the thing I love about some 70s cars, you had an engine big enough that if you kind of properly equip it with today's technology, you can pass a lot of things that are on the road. Some of today's cars are just too fast. You'll never catch them, right? It's just not going to happen. But for a while, especially late 80s, early 90s, the joke was you could pass anything but a gas station. In fact, if you hit the gas hard enough on some of those cars, you could actually watch the gas gauge kind of go down. But that's okay. It was a lot of fun.
A buddy of mine had the same or a similar model LeBaron, and he would joke that the car had a turbocharger, and when we were going down the road, if he flipped the air conditioner off, I think the thing picked up like 10 horsepower. Oh, which was absolutely significant for a K car. 10 horsepower addition in the K car was significant.
Absolutely. My dad had a 78 LTD. It was the same problem. But back to the point about rage, I think the reason people rage is two things. One, everybody wants to prove they're smarter than everybody else, and I get that, right? Everybody wants to seem like the guy who knows everything, but it's also those sort of dopamine hits that everybody wants. And what I think is interesting in life is I'm PhD in physics. I've worked in the defense aerospace world. I worked at MIT for 12 years after my PhD. The smartest people I've ever met are the first ones to admit they don't know something. And the people who aren't necessarily as smart will never tell you they don't know anything, and they're going to have an opinion about everything. And I was watching a show recently called The Three Body Problem. And, one of the things it brought up is that if you want to actually take down a society and beat them, you either discredit or kill all the scientists. And I was like, hey, wait a minute, what? Time out. Let's not kill the scientists because that's me. But the second part of that was, especially in a social media space, think about it since the human malware that took place a couple of years ago. how often are the people with true opinions about something that is scientific that are willing to render it and defend it publicly? How many of those are actually scientists? Right? I mean, how many instant vaccine experts did we have that are out there? And I kid you not, I've been divorced for about 2 years. I have had people I've gone out with on a first date ask me if I was pro or con vaccine. And I'm like, are we still on this? What the hell? So there are still people who are like, I'm an anti-vaxxer, and if you've been vaxxed, you won't come close to me. I'm like, okay, fine, bye, see you. But it cracks me up that the people that are willing to go out there and explain science to people are people with absolutely no background in it, and they get so angry when they don't get paid attention to, which leads them back to social media where they can go find their little echo chamber and have a lot of people tell them they're right and compliment them, and there you go, there's your dopamine hits, right? So anyway, that's kind of where I think it comes from, is our just inner need for dopamine and our inner need to prove we're smarter than everybody.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Tim, and I feel like it's we talked a little bit about this, and I want to talk about this from the tabletop RPG space. Despite the fact that something like Dungeons and Dragons is a cooperative game. Hang on just 1 second. I gotta fix something real quick, or else bad things are going to happen. Hold on. Talk to the nice people, Tim.
He's going to fix things. So now we all watch for smoke to appear from outside camera range and just sort of come in. No. But I see there is somebody who said, yeah, it is a niche in the dating world where it's like anti-vaxxers. I get that. But what I don't get is, when people find out I work some of the places I work, I've had people legitimately tell me to go do my homework over subjects that I actually am sort of an expert in. Because they're like, well, that disagrees with what I think. Therefore, you must absolutely be wrong and stupid. You need to do your homework. And, what are the odds that after me working in nuclear physics for years, I'm the one that needs to do my homework on that subject? So anyway, Bill is back. Did you fix it?
I'm back. I did. My everything has gone wrong, and I am outraged about that. My camera boom was starting imperceptibly to tilt down, and I knew that would go from geometric to exponential really quick, so I had to tighten a lug down. I haven't had to touch that thing in months. It's like I left the house yesterday to go play AD&D with Harmony Ginger, and I had an absolutely fantastic time. And while I was out of the house, everything in my studio decided to go bonkers. So anyway, in tabletop role-playing games, gamers in general, we are wired to want win conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why edition wars, which are stupid and pointless and absolutely will not ever... I will jokingly talk about my favorite versions of D&D, but I have said before, look, I don't care if you play original D&D, any of the basic D&Ds, Advanced D&D, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 3.5, or 5th edition D&D, all D&D is good.
I'm with you, anything but 4th. That's just Magic the Gathering in disguise.
But again, I leave that stuff on the sidewalk, but I think that's why we, and I include myself, because if you go back and you look at my embarrassing post history on various social media platforms from the early 2000s and even the late 90s, yes, I edition warred. Why? Because I got the thrill of saying I'm right and you're not. And people engaged with me and did the same thing, because they got the thrill of saying it is an entirely subjective matter. I think one of the stupidest things, one of the earliest wake-up calls I got about edition warring was, and rage in general, was when 5e was announced and the playtest materials started coming out over on a website, one of the most aptly named places on the internet, somethingawful.com. The people in that forum Tim, you'd have thought that there had, I don't know. I can't think of a tasteful, appropriate analogy. They were really mad, but that is also an outrage farm. And someone said, and I'll never forget this, thank you so much, whoever it was that said this, for shining a light on just how dumb this kind of argument can be, because he was legitimately angry and said, I can't believe Wizards of the Coast is getting rid of objectively the best Dungeons and Dragons. How do you say objectively the best about a role-playing game? Look, I think we could all agree that Fatal, the role-playing game, is probably not good to play, but there are some people who are going to want to play it. But even if we just focus on D&D and D&D alone, how do you look at any edition of D&D and say this is objectively better? So, look, I love first edition AD&D. I think those words, I think it's the best, and I will sing its praises as I do 5 nights a week. Don't nobody talk to me about Friday. Look, I was completely clapped out, guys. Okay. But I will sing its praises from the top of my lungs, but I will never seriously, legitimately say this is objectively better.
So let's focus on this for a minute, right? Because this is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. If we look at what's going on in the world today, and AI is coming, right? And AI has a chance to replace more jobs than we care to talk about, and they're not coming back until we go figure out what to do economically. So let's just assume we're coming down the pipeline where it's going to be tougher and tougher to get a job, as we've all seen, unless you're willing to take less money. So one of the things that I look for in employees, and I've got, I run a tech company, right? So I've got employees running around, and I've run big programs. I've run small programs. I've run medium programs, and I've worked on programs as large as Patriot Missile and as small as, 5 people. But the thing that gets me is the best employees, especially on the technical side, and in general, just the best employees, are the ones that are more creative. You don't not the ones I have to go, hey, look, I need you to go do these 5 things. Here's a list. I wrote them down. I gave you steps, because I can replace that person with automation in a minute, right? Anybody I have to give explicit instructions to, I can pretty much get rid of with today's technology if I really felt like it. Now, that being said, the employees I want to keep and I want to hug even to this day are people who I don't have to tell those things to. And those typically are the more creative ones. Creativity, and I have 3 kids who are 14, about to turn 13 and 11. Creativity, and I've seen this because I used to teach, gets beaten out of kids at the middle school level, whether figuratively, not literally, because I know this is the internet and people will say, oh, he thinks we beat our kids. No, we don't say that. What we do is we kind of remove it from the vocabulary and we say, no, do exactly these things. Well, role-playing games back in the 80s and being an avid reader are where my creativity kind of stayed up, right? And I find almost uniformly the people that are creative types have a tendency to either be into some sort of gaming offline. Like role-playing game with virtual tabletop counts as offline. I'm talking about not, Halo or something, right, which I play. So I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that, but it's not creative because somebody else determined exactly what steps you're going to take to get there. But some sort of gaming that involves creativity or critical thinking. Reading of fiction. If you say, oh, I'm an avid reader and your entire bookshelf is full of self-help or nonfiction, that's fine, but it's not really going to foster any kind of creativity. And the third one is some sort of music. So I found people who play one or more instruments tend to be far more creative. And those are things we don't do anymore. And I think the gaming industry, whether it's first, second, third, or fifth edition, if you got a good table full of people, I don't give a shit, right? If I'm having fun with the people around the table and allowed to sort of use those creative juices, that's what it's about, right? It's not about which set of rules did you use. It's about getting together with people and getting to exercise parts of your brain, which, by the way, creativity, if you start to defeat the monsters, goes back to producing that dopamine, but not in nearly as large quantities as 53 people going, oh my God, look at your new Ferrari. Can I have a ride? All right. So to me, it's just a different form of dopamine, but it's sort of the natural version versus the artificial version. And is it sort of, hey, I got slightly high because I had two drinks of wine, or hey, I just shot blue crystal meth into my bloodstream, and now I get it all at once. So that to me is the big difference. Is rage gets you there quickly, it gets you there instantly, it gets you there, right now. I want it now, and it gets you there in a big way. But then when you come crashing back down, what do you do?
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were, what I was talking about. Rage engagement is, you have to do that constantly, because once you build that audience, you have to hunt stuff like that down. And I'm no financial genius, right? I've reported a few times on how Hasbro's finances have not been they've been up and down, but lots of companies' finances have been up and down. I mean, I could close my eyes and point at a giant wall chart of companies and say, okay, who's that? Blue Buffalo Pet Food? Okay. And I could literally just switch the names of the companies, and instead of talking about Hasbro, talk about the financial missteps of Blue Buffalo, and does this mean the death of Blue Buffalo? And I don't, it wouldn't matter. And there's people, again, in the tabletop RPG space on YouTube, that's all they do. And guys, I'm not saying, so don't listen to them. Don't watch their channels, watch mine. Watch who you enjoy. But just understand, they are chasing something and pushing you towards something. Do you want that kind of that kind of dopamine rush? Do you want to just to the next video? Oh, Games Workshop, they're going to go bust any day now. Guys, Games Workshop is not going to go bust any day now.
Hasbro's not going to sink either, right?
Hasbro's not going away. Games Workshop's not going away. Microsoft is not going away. Disney is not going away. We can dislike them. And again, it goes back to what I said. I will tell you guys, when I hear of something that Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro has done to further screw up D&D, I will absolutely report on it. I am not becoming Miss Sunshine and Rainbows over here. All right. If there's bad stuff, there's bad stuff. But I remember I was talking to the shrink once, and he used a word that I fell in love with, and I will use forever. It's awfulizing. It's awfulizing, and I'm not going to awfulize every single thing that comes down the pike, because I can't chase that. The energy I get back from that dopamine rush, and Tim, I think I'm not going to speak for you, but I think maybe this is the case for yourself in things that you find, but the energy you get back from that dopamine rush is way less than the energy you expended chasing it.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why I prefer sort of the smaller dopamine rush over a longer period of time, because it gives you a chance to not become that addict of, oh, I need more. And I've seen it with the scientists too, right? I've known Nobel laureates that won the prize and then became, oh, I'm Professor so-and-so. I'm like, yeah, you're the same guy I drove home drunk from the bar twice. You haven't really changed just because they gave you the prize. To me, it does take a lot more energy, but the rage part of it takes so much energy that you then start to look for other ways to kind of feed that beast, right? So you'll go more and more outlandishly crazy. And it was kind of funny. I was watching an older, when Jon Stewart still had his Apple TV show. I was watching one of those recently, and he pointed out that the media, or a lot of news reporting, is now nothing but pure rage baiting, right? It's absolutely, how can we get eyeballs on a screen and get them only on our screen? So what they have to do is they have to over, sell everything. It's like, they get to the point of, oh my God, this is what's going to happen. And it's more opinion now than news. And it's more about, let me predict the next steps. And of course, I'm going to predict the earth is going to stop spinning on its axis, and, towers are going to crumble, and 5G will kill everybody, and whatever it is. Right. Instead of just, hey, let me discuss actual facts with you. It's more along the lines of let me see what I can do to get more eyeballs on my screen. And part of it makes sense because, they're commercial entities and they want to charge more for advertising. And that's, people complain about influencers getting paid, but that's really all TV shows are, right? Is just sort of influencers in a different way. Johnny Carson, right? You go back that far, he was sort of the only influencer around for a while. If you weren't on his show, you didn't get your movie pushed very hard. So, but he never raged, right? He did it for a much longer period of time. And I think if you want to go to that sort of rage, the pure rage example. So let's think back a little bit, 10 years ago. You couldn't go anywhere on a newsstand, a radio, or TV without seeing a clip of Glenn Beck. He mastered the rage bait, right? Where is he now? People get really tired of the outrage and they're like, all right, see you, Glenn. Right.
I think he's on some AM markets.
He started his own channel, but nobody by and large watches it. Right. So he tried to I am everything. I am the king. I am in charge, and I'm going to start my own network, and we're going to have it all my way. And nobody gave a shit.
Limbaugh back in the 80s tried to launch his own TV show. Nobody watched it.
Nobody watched, right?
They watched it. He had that drive time slot national down pat, but man, he was cold fish on TV.
Yeah, but compared to Glenn Beck, Limbaugh was not angry at all. He was a happy guy in Flower Field compared to Glenn Beck.
And without going too far down that rabbit hole, but I feel like that it's kind of a good analogy. I feel like in social media, a lot of people are pursuing that. I want to be, the next Stern or Beck or Hannity or
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. People want to catch that wave and let it carry them up. And, folks have gotten kind of caught up in chasing that down. Let me tell you what, there was a situation that happened.
Hang on 1 second. Michael, yes, you're right. Glenn Beck hasn't many followers, but how many did he have compared to what he has today? I would bet you those two numbers are drastically different.
Yeah. But a couple of years ago, there was a young lady, and she basically, she and her husband positioned themselves to be influencers in the old school end of the TTRPG hobby. Now, I'm sure a lot of you people know who I'm talking about. We're not going to have discussion about her and what her husband got up to, but they basically got outed as pretty toxic people. And a lot of their former employees came out of the woodwork saying, here's two people who would roll into gaming conventions that would have like 600 people at them, and they would act like they were king shit, like they were stepping on stage at Madison Square Garden, and with tens of thousands of fans cheering for them, and that wasn't the case at all. I talked about it a very little bit with my buddy Yang Yan Zhao on his live stream, but I didn't do a bunch of segments about it, because at the end of the day, as outrageous as the way she acted, as egregious as some of her behaviors and her husband's behaviors, I should point out, or at least the perception of them, I didn't, it was just the whole attitude around it. It was a clash of personalities, and it was very toxic, and it didn't have anything to do with how awesome Lost Caverns of Sojkanth or Keep on the Borderlands or the Dungeon Master's Guide or a set of original Grenadier figures were. It had nothing to do with that. And I walked away from it. but there was a cottage industry for a few months of let's focus on this person and all of her misdeeds, all of her husband's misdeeds, and hammer on that and hammer on it. And look how terrible she was, everyone. Look at how terrible this was. And I'm reminded of a joke that Rodney Dangerfield once told. He said, I don't like to say my kid's stupid, but he came in the house the other day with a handful of dog shit. And he said, Daddy, look what I almost stepped in. And that's kind of the same thing. It's like, yeah, I know there's shit out there. Don't pick it up and bring it to me and tell me and say, look what you almost stepped in. And I feel like getting away from that is going to be good for our souls, whether you have spiritual beliefs or whatever, Tim, or anyone else. It's good for it's better for our minds, I think.
Well, it's just mental health differences, right? I mean, there's hundreds of psychological peer-reviewed papers with statistics that are well done that show that reading and relaxation time and playtime, or what most people call playtime, what you and I call Dungeons and Dragons, right, is very good for your mental health and very good for your long-term mental stability. Staying always in one frame of mind is very bad. So if you're constantly in that rage frame of mind, and I say, Glenn Beck, I could have picked any of 60 different names on the right or left. I just picked one. Relatively random. So those sorts of things are bad for you, right? So you've got the things that are good for you, the things that are bad for you. And as I hit 52, right, or hit my 50s, I see people who are my parents' generation and some in my generation that are starting to have mental health issues. You're starting to have dementia issues. You're starting to have to deal with that. And then you see other people who are the creatives, the Clint Eastwoods of the world and others, and you start to think about those mental health issues. And how do I get to be in my 90s and still as mentally, still have the mental acuity of a Clint Eastwood who's 93 and still making freaking movies, right? And maybe he's just a freak of nature, but I see a lot of people who are creatives that live a lot longer than your typical scientist or engineer who have a one-track frame of mind. I would much rather live to the 80 or 90s. So, I try to focus as much as I can, or at least as much as my time as I can on reading and other creative pursuits. Mostly because since I've done that, my blood pressure has gone down quite a lot without medication. Right? I've noticed I sleep better. I've noticed my people I work with are like, wow, you're easier to get along with. Part of that was because I got divorced and I was easier to get along with after my divorce. But part of that also has been because I have time now to pick up fiction books again and do stuff that relaxes me or enjoys me. I enjoy and gets me out of that frame of mind. So, well, what good is all that stuff, right? Because I get asked that all the time. Oh, Dr. Imholt, don't you have better things to do with your time than read a book? Well, sure. I have in my career, I have 22 or 23 issued U.S. patents. But if you look at the time period in which I was doing the work that evolved into those patents, it was when I actually took time outside of work to do something creative and took times outside of work to do things that weren't involving my work. And didn't involve me just going and watching a football game, which is nothing wrong with because I go to football games. I was at a basketball game not that long ago, right? So those things are great. But the times in my life when I was most technically productive were the times in my life when I was doing outside creative pursuits. And I think that sort of everything in moderation approach really works well. And if you go pure rage, that's great for you, but it doesn't work for me and it doesn't work for most of society. And if you want to die early, go ahead. I mean, I don't really care. Or if you want to suffer from some sort of think about the angriest people, strokes, heart attack, high blood pressure, dementia, it all kind of sets in early. And that's not something I really look forward to doing. So, that's that take on it is if you stay away from the anger, you might live longer and your mental health will be better.
Yeah. It does make me wonder. I do wonder that there is a lot of outrage bait here on YouTube and yes, here in the tabletop RPG hobby, where and a lot of it is a younger crowd. Okay. There's people who, they were born in 2000. right? And they see YouTube as a potential income stream, and they have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of more viewers than I do, or probably ever will. But their shtick is rage. Where are they going to be when they hit my age? You know, I mean, on the one hand, you might say, well, Bill, they're not going to be doing YouTube. They're going to be lying on piles of money. You know, all the cash that they've raked in from rage clicks, which is certainly not something I'm going to be doing. But what is what is the you know, what is the long-term prognosis, I guess I might say, for that? And you know, you touch on something very very, very accurate, I think, Tim. You know, when you talk about this being, it literally is bad for mental health, and I don't want to steep my brain in that stuff constantly. I mean, I kid about, you know, angers and energy, and you know, I love being a rage junkie. No, I don't. No.
So, you know, especially this year, right? So you have a presidential election this year, and we're all gearing up for that. And you know, I got actively enough involved in politics at one point in my life to realize that I don't want to be actively involved with either of the two major political parties because they're both nuts, in different ways. But one of the things I would actually support is, like, if we passed a law that said, hey, you can't, PACs, super PACs, rich people, whatever, you can't run a political ad aimed at telling me why not to vote for somebody else. You can't run a political ad that's, you know, based on, oh, here's a bunch of negative stuff about this person. The only thing you can run an ad on is why I need to vote for you. Just tell me what it is you're going to do that's going to make life different. And that's the only ad I give a shit about seeing, right? When was the last time you saw one of those? It's always, oh, that person sucks, right? Oh, I don't care, right? Tell me why you're going to do something better than that other guy. Not just that you're awesome. What are you going to do, right? That to me makes a big difference. You call it free speech all you want, but I'm talking about paid ads. And if you want to go online, you want to go on the radio, and you want to tell me those things, that's fine, as long as you have your show, you have your platform, you have your time. But if you want to run a paid ad, but if somebody has you on to discuss, that's different. But I'm talking about paid advertising. Donor-sponsored advertising should be about why I should vote for you, not against. And I know constitutionally it's never going to happen, so maybe it's just me living in a dreamland. But it to me, it just sort of, we get all these paid ads and commercials on TV that are all angry, and it just drives me nuts. So I tend to ignore it all.
Well, Jimmy Invictus said, embrace stoicism. I'm not going to go that far. All right. I'm no stoic. I'm a passionate guy. And the things I love, I love, and I'm going to be passionate about. And I can tell you guys straight up, if you think I'm going soft, if tomorrow Wizards of the Coast announces, like, you know, hey, we're taking all classic D&D off of drive-through again, we're not going to support it. We're going to take steps to shut down, you know, OSR games that are too close to our IP. We're just gonna strangle that off because we think it is diluting our brand. If they did that, you guys want to see some passion? You want to see some rage? Dude, I would be on the front lines of that. So I'm not going stoic.
So
okay.
Somebody brought up barbarians in the chat, right? And I'm missing it now. But you know, rage has a place. Okay, so hear me out. High hits of rage have a place, but you can't. There's even a rule in the rule books. You can't rage constantly, right? You can't constantly be in rage mode. There's limited periods of time. And if you get those dopamine hits, and rage, you largely, if you think about it for a second, is going to come from an adrenaline hit. But if you're used to raging all the time, you have to go to higher and higher levels of rage to get that same adrenaline hit. And sooner or later, you're going to peak, right? You're not going to be able to rage anymore, right? So where does it go, right? There are limits. And no, I'm not trying to limit free speech. What I was just saying, like, yes, if somebody showered with their daughter, that should be on the news. But paid ads, you shouldn't have to worry about that kind of shit. You should just be able to tell people why you voted for them. But that should be covered someplace else with our nice news systems. But so rage is inherently, it has its purpose, it has its place, it's part of humanity, it's not going away. But if you're 100% in that mode, how are you going to ever come out of it? And how are you ever going to go anywhere else? Because it's the only way you're used to getting um, uh, rage on a particular area. Or think of it another way. Like, so certain adult industries, okay? And I'm not going to mention which ones. I'll just let you guys figure it out because we don't want to get Bill's channel demonetized. If you become addicted to those things, it does affect your drive in certain parts of the house when you're alone with someone of the opposite gender or same gender or whoever it is you go into that part of the house with. But if you go and sort of consume that product, it has been shown to have detriment when you go try to partake in that activity yourself. Too much of anything is a bad thing, right? It just is. So you need to figure out how to have all things in moderation. It's like, I happen to love cake. Can I eat cake all the time? No, I certainly can't, especially in my 50s. When I was in my 20s and in the Army, I could eat all the cake I wanted. It was a much different time, right? I was in the Army. I ran all the time. I did push-ups all the time. Now I have to have cake in moderation. So, you have to think about things like, hey, if I'm going to have cake, am I going to have just cake for the sake of cake, which I could have done when I was 22? Or am I going to go all out with it and I'm going to have a small amount of nothing but cakes, blueberry thing with topping and all? Yeah, I'm probably going to go all out and have the good one because I'm only going to do it once, right? So you need to have that balance in life. And I think the constant rage goes way out of balance. And I think, constantly hearts and flowers goes out of balance too, right? But you do have to have both sides of that coin. But I think trying to find that dopamine in a different way. So like, take it another way. Like I see this one pop up on Twitter all the time, and it's basically for people who can't do math. You get these posts about, that are basically just there for you to engage with and figure out, how do I get people to answer and get my engagement rate way up, which has some effect on the algorithm, but not as much as people think it does. People put these posts like, would you rather have $5,000 a week or $1 million or this or that or the other? And people are like, I want to jump on the $1 million right now. But if $5,000 a week is a much better deal than $1 million right now, right? Because it goes on forever. And yes, I know inflation, all that other shit, but $5,000 a week is not a small number if you go across a large period of time. Doesn't give you the dopamine hit or the cash hit that you get from $1 million right away. But it gives you a smaller level of a much longer period of time. And what you see is people in the comments like, give me the $1 million now. Okay. You just screwed that up, right? It really does. It is a big difference if you look at some of those things. And yes, I understand time value of money, but I'm saying there are some that are just so unbalanced towards here's the cash hit versus an extended period at some weird rate. It's basically designed for people to engage with who can't do math. So it to me it's all about kind of give and take and what's best in life. And there's a time and place for absolutely everything. There's a time and place for those adult channels. There's a time and place for rage. There's a time and place for anger, but it's not constant. And we've just kind of been fed this constant wheel of anger and hate and rage for so long that it's kind of gotten silly.
Oh, unquestionably, it's gotten ridiculous. But if I could just touch on something you said real quick, Tim, if you're offering the $5,000 a week for a lifetime, I want you to know that I'm a sensible person, and I would absolutely take that rather than the $1 million. Anyway,
3 kids coming up on college, man.
We'll talk. No, I think you're definitely onto something, and it ties in to the instant gratification. And we're gonna. I just got done with the polemic about how I'm not going to edition war, but I am going to mention this in passing. I know you guys out there who watch this show and like to hear about D&D history, but you also play 5e or 4e or 3e, whatever. I know you folks aren't like this, but hear me out. You can look at the design of Dungeons and Dragons as it currently stands, as it has evolved since 2000, and see that descent into instant gratification. look at the XP charts before you can cast certain spells, for example, for magic users in first edition AD&D. I mean, what can a second level magic user do? Throw out 2 sleep spells and stand back and wait for the fighters to end all the monsters and collect a few coins and then carry on. Or asleep in a magic missile, or if you don't have sleep, spider climb and get up on the ceiling and throw pots of oil at them. The point is, it is a slow process. One of my favorite bully pulpits is paladins aren't anything now. It is meaningless to say, I'm going to play a paladin. You say in AD&D, I'm going to play a paladin to me as a DM, and my response is, I hope you get the rolls, buddy. I hope you get the rolls. Now it's, I'm going to play a paladin. He is a chaotic neutral kobold half gelatinous cube with 4 levels of sorcerer. His Patreon is Asmodeus. I'm like, that's not a paladin. Yes, it is. It says so in the book. And there's nothing beyond saying, I want that. Give me. The first level magic users in later versions of D&D start out with the firepower of a 3rd level magic user in advanced D&D first edition or original or basic. Mm-hmm. And the reason that is, it's not because people who play 5e or 4e or 3e are objectively bad people or anything. It's because Wizards of the Coast has looked at what they perceive their audience to be and said, instant gratification. Oh. We're not going to make you play for 6 months. You can get this in 1 2-hour session. And that's what they built the game around.
And it's really hard to die. Right.
Oh yeah, it's really, really hard to lose a character. I mean, there's death save after death. I think, with all respect, I think one of the silliest things I have ever heard about design is Luke Gygax's got a bunch of his dad notes, Gary Gygax's notes, and he's got this Kickstarter thing going and all the luck in the world to him. But when he was talking about how he's going to revamp his dad's dungeons, he said, without a hint of irony, no teleporter traps, no deadfalls, no sliding floors, no rotating rooms, because that's not what modern gamers want.
Well, that's pure Gary, right? I mean, that's just part of what he loved.
I want that. I consider myself, I live in modern times. I'm a gamer. I want that.
So people ask, I see their things, right? So I get this a lot. Why play D&D? Well, it's a great way to learn to work as a team. It's a great way to figure out how to solve problems and how to overcome obstacles. And that's the thing I like about AD&D versus 5th edition is it's a lot harder to figure out how to overcome those obstacles. So you have to dig a little deeper. And that's one of the things I really liked about Gamma World too, was because as a kid playing Gamma, you get to learn about weird, goofy weapons that may or may not ever be actually possible. And then when you grow up and become a scientist, you find out, holy shit, some of this stuff might actually be worth doing. But to me, it's about that problem solving. It's about that working as a team and trying to figure out how to get all your characters to survive the day. And 5th edition, I think, kind of takes that away in some cases. And says, okay, we're going to just assume our players are idiots and they don't have to really figure out how to survive, or they don't want to work very hard. Okay, maybe they don't assume that. Maybe they just change the rules. But to me, that's kind of what it feels like. Is like, it's sort of like, okay, we're going to make this easier for people and make it so easy that nobody has to think anymore. And it's kind of a problem for me. I want people to be able to think. I want people to have that critical set of skills. Because I'll never forget when I was still working at the university, I had kids come up to me who were in my class going, okay, what do I have to memorize to get through the test? I'm like, it's quantum mechanics. There's not really, you remember how to solve problems. No, just what formula do I have to memorize? I'm like, okay, you don't understand the point of this, right? It's a whole different thing. It's not about a formula. It's about problem solving and how to actually do that. They're like, no, there's got to be a formula. And I'm like, there's really not one. There's about 30. So, and then you figure out how to use those formulas together to go off and solve your problem. And off and on, you'd have these kids who wanted to learn how to just memorize their way through it. And then you had the other kids who wanted to understand how stuff worked. And that's really, I think, what earlier editions of D&D work is. It kind of helps you figure out how to understand how things work so you can overcome obstacles, because your character that you spend all this time on might die, right? And you don't want that to happen. Quantum mechanics, you both memorize and don't. Yeah.
The test comes, the waveform collapses, and you got your grade.
Or you can just nuke it and call it a day. Michael, it goes way past our order of operations. Nothing wrong with order of operations. It's an absolute important tool to mathematics, but that's different stuff. Once you get past calculus 2, all things change. Not really. It just becomes multidimensional, and then it gets really weird. Anyway, so but that's kind of what I got out of the game as a kid, was that sort of critical thinking skill and that sort of problem solving skill. And I think I've carried that through to my adult life. And some of the coolest people I've ever worked with, I later found out, I'm like, yeah, that guy's fun to work with. That guy's really creative. That guy's really good. They either played role-playing games as a kid, they still play, or they read sci-fi, or they play an instrument of some kind, right? So it sort of harkens back to exciting those creative cells in the brain. And some of the people I like working with the least are the ones that are the most angry about everything, right? So, take it for what it's worth. But in a society where we have had severe job displacement, and are probably going to have a lot more of it, do you want to be the guy that's easy to work with, or the guy that's pissed off all the time and has trouble keeping a job, right? So I'd much rather be easy to work with. Even though I know I own the place and I can't get fired. So it's tough to fire yourself. I guess I could. I mean, anyway.
I've tried. I keep going to HR and bringing up grievances, and I really can't get rid of myself. I've tried, Tim.
Yeah, it doesn't take, right? You fire yourself and it's like,
Yeah, I keep threatening me with lawsuits if I fire me. So I'm stuck with me.
Yeah, take the house from yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But the point that I was getting at was not any particular kind of paladin or race combo or anything like that. I heard from someone who had worked on 5th edition as a consultant that the drive with 5th edition was a campaign would be 6 hours. Whether it's 3 2-hour sessions, 6 1-hour sessions, 1 6-hour session, that a campaign's beginning, middle, and end was 6 hours. Now, again, guys, if you love 5e, if you're watching this after the fact, don't say, well, Bill Sylvie says that he thinks 5e is only good for 6 hours of play. That's not. 5e is a fine game. It's got good bones. I'm not going to argue the nuances of 5e right now, but that is so incredibly reductive, and again, it creates a feedback loop, I think, of these people only want short-term dopamine rushes. Here's a bunch of short-term dopamine rushes. We're only getting short-term dopamine rushes, so let's just have short-term dopamine rushes. These people only want short-term, and it just builds on itself, and that's where that goes back into what we were originally talking, the original thesis of not getting on board the outrage train. Because if all I did with my channel, or if all Tim did with his channel, he's got a YouTube channel, by the way, it's linked in the description below. Please go give Tim a subscription. If that's all we did, then that's all I would have, and I would have to generate stuff. There's channels on YouTube that have like gamer in the title, or computer this or science that, but all they're putting out is rage bait. Mm-hmm. If you scroll back through their dozens or possibly hundreds of videos and go all the way back to the beginning of their channels, guess what? they used to just talk about video games, or they used to talk about computer tech, or they used to talk about science, and they don't anymore. And you can go through and you can find those videos where things began to slip, where they became, today's outrage. And there's this great scene. If you've never read Orwell's 1984, and Tim, I know you have, it's the 2 minutes hate, and they show videos. Everybody has to come out to the square, and there's this massive projection screen. And Apple recreated it for their 1984 commercial when the Mac was released back 40 years ago. And it's everyone sitting in there getting blared at them, East Asia and Eurasia, and they're the enemy, and everybody gets to blow their top and scream at the top of their lungs, death to the enemy, and that sort of thing. And I kind of feel like those channels are just kind of feeding people like sheep. They're just sitting there, and they just want their 2 minutes hate. There's this web comic where a guy's saying, I'm angry, and a dude hands him a folder and says, here's a solution. And in the next panel, the guy's lighting it on fire, and he's saying, I don't want a solution, I want to be angry. And I'd really rather that we look for solutions to the things that are making us angry. Because if you go and you watch the rage bait videos, 99% of them end with, well, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I like
subscribe, donate, follow me on Patreon, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I like solutions. I like talking to people. Like I love, sort of just sitting down with people and discussing stuff. And somebody asked what my field in nuclear physics was, and I'll give it to you quickly because it's off topic. Nano confinement fusion and neutron sensing. And if you ever want to try to detect something fun, neutral particles are the tough ones. So it led into dark matter sensing on the side of weakly interactive massing particles, which are also known as WIMPs. And finding WIMPs at MIT was pretty easy. These days, it's mostly AI and machine learning.
Just look in a locker.
Exactly. Actually, what's funny is everybody asks about Good Will Hunting, and there's that scene where he's on the chalkboard in the hallways, and there's all these lockers. That's not actually on campus. That's at a community college up the street, because there's no lockers anywhere on campus. And you actually, no movie has ever been allowed to film on campus. So they're very, because they get requests like 6 times a day, so they always reject it. But I didn't spend my life looking for nothing. I was looking for neutrons, and some other people were looking for weakly interacting massive particles. But they all had tenure, so you're allowed to do nothing if you have tenure. But back to the rage side, it is kind of funny to me that I was watching the show recently called a Three Body Problem over on Netflix. I kind of finished it, and I uploaded a video about it right before this. And, it's this alien species coming down to Earth. And one of the things they're afraid of us because our technology might advance further than theirs has. So the first thing they're starting to do is kill off a bunch of scientists or discredit them. And I'm like, well, that would be a way to get technological advancements to stop in a society. And if you really want to, and their point was in the show, I think, if you want to control a society, if you really want to grab hold of it and keep control of a group of people, getting rid of the scientists and the smart people is not that other people aren't smart. Don't get me wrong, but the scientists and the engineers who do that creative and discovery process and invent new things. And honestly, invention can come from anywhere. You don't have to be a qualified scientist to do this, because some of the coolest inventions I've ever heard of came from non-scientists, like Post-it notes. I used to use those things constantly, and it was like an admin assistant over at 3M that came up with it. But in the movie, in the series, they were like, hey, let's discredit or kill off all the scientists. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, gosh, in the last 10 years, we've really gotten to a point as a society where we're like, we just don't believe scientists anymore. We're like, nope, those guys are crazy. And by the way, when we're going to start talking about vaccines, and I'm not going to do it, everybody became a vaccine expert. And I'm like, as a scientist, I'm like, I don't know jack crap about vaccines. I don't know anything about them at all. But if I'm going to have a question, I'm going to call somebody who does, right? So I actually did call somebody who's a guy I know a little bit at UT Southwestern, and I'm not going to mention his name, or 50 people will email him. But well-known scientist, Nobel Prize in medicine. And I was like, okay, if anybody knows, it's him, right? And he emailed me back. He's like, yeah, this is the vaccine I kind of preferred, and I'm not going to go into which one that one was either. But he looked at it and he's like, yeah, you need it. You need a vaccine. And something's better than nothing. And what we've got is not the perfect vaccine, but I'm not going to go take the guy on the news's word for it. I want to go talk to an expert. I want to hear from an expert. I want to hear from a guy whose job is vaccines, right? And I get it all the time where, people will occasionally, not so much anymore because I work in AI and machine learning, but I used to get these invitations to go talk to different places about nuclear physics. And the last couple of years I had those invitations before I kind of started saying no all the time. The number of people, and I'd spent 6, 7, 8 years working with Peter Fisher up at MIT, who's the current or recently left department chair, and a guy named Ernie Moniz, who went on to be Secretary of Energy under Obama. I spent years working with those guys. And the number of times I've had people tell me, well, you just need to go do your homework. I'm like, okay, I'm the one that needs to do my homework on nuclear matters. Sure. But the number of times I've had people just end a conversation with, you need to do your research. Like, okay, sure. And as soon as I hear that phrase these days where people tell me, do your research, I can tell two things. Number one, they're pissed off. And number two, nothing I say is going to get them to change their mind ever, because they're instantly convinced they're always right and instantly convinced you're always wrong. And if you disagree with them, they're just going to get pissed off and tell you to do your research and call it a day. Yeah, nuclear fusion is still 15, 20 years away. It's not coming up anytime soon. You can get fusion to work. I mean, we got fusion to work in the lab all the time, but you got to put way more energy in than you get out. So it's still far away. It's inching closer, but I still wouldn't put a year on it because I'm not an idiot. It's not true. We use nuclear fusion all the time. We've got solar cells all over town, and the sun is full of fusion.
There you go. Yeah, we already have fusion power. It's just one astronomical unit away.
Exactly.
No, I pinned Kabuki Kid's comment because I want to touch on this. This is actually a very important thing that Kabuki says. I must be sheltered. I never see these hateful channels, and good for you, because we're going to step into Tim's avocation currently. If you start watching them, YouTube goes, you want to see more of this. There's a very funny video about a guy named Ryan George that deals with this, where a guy goes looking for a video on how to fix a noisy door, and then that's all YouTube wants to show him.
Yep.
He's like, hey, I saw it. I'm done. Please stop showing me videos about fixing doors. And so, he's inundated. Algorithms train to stuff you like very, very, very quickly.
If you even pause on it, like if you hesitate while it's on your screen, it's registering that as you like this one, which is why I had to get my daughter a different YouTube account. Otherwise, the only thing I'm watching is Taylor Swift. Nothing against Taylor Swift. I just don't want to see it all the time.
Yeah, I sanitize my Twitter feed. I do not click on political argument bait. I do not click on rage bait. I just talk about positive things in tabletop role-playing games, and I focus solely on that. And if I slip up, if I click one thing, the next day I got to take 30 minutes and sanitize it again.
It's fast.
It is the same as YouTube, or it is the same on YouTube rather. I watched a video once. I thought it was pretty bad. It was a historical video, something with aircraft in World War II. And with all respect to the creator, I don't feel bad for saying this because they had like 50,000 subs or something. That's plenty of subscribers. I watched the video and I'm like, your narration is bad and your video clips are poorly put together, and you're talking about the Corsair and you're showing pictures of Mustangs over Europe. I don't really. And I did not subscribe to his channel at the time. I watched the video for a little bit, clicked off of it. Well, YouTube has constantly said, "Hey, this guy made a video about this. Do you want to watch it?" And going through and selecting don't recommend this channel anymore is the only way to stop it. You can give down votes, you can leave nasty comments, whatever like that. YouTube considers any attention as good attention. So I jokingly say this, like, if I say something you guys don't agree with, and you downvote my video, you give it a dislike or whatever, YouTube's not helping you. Leave a comment and tell me what you didn't like, because YouTube, if every one of my videos got 100% dislikes, guess what? YouTube would still recommend them, because it would say, this guy's saying something that makes people angry. Recommend him.
So, Bill, you've mentioned this to me a couple times, and for everybody, I'm in Bill's Tuesday night game, and we've talked off and on for 3 months or something now. We got to get you to North Texas Con, because you keep mentioning World War II aircraft and these historic things. And I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm going to try to share my screen. It's not going to let me do it. On your side, I'm going to send you a link, man. You got to show this to people, because this is in North Texas. We got to get you to North Texas Con. You could stay at my place or something. Well, that is in North Texas. This is the Kavanaugh Flight Museum. And just to get you less stressed, we got to get you out here to show you this thing. These are all functional aircraft that this museum, these things all work, has in a couple of hangars here in North Texas. You pay them $10 or something, you can go through and tour all day. Some of these they will actually let you take up in the air, not by yourself, with a qualified pilot. But every one of these is in their museum and functional.
That is glorious. That is absolutely amazing.
And to this, I actually am going to go do it one of these days, because I want to. The old MASH helicopters, like that had the things on the side. And
Choctaw. It
had like a lawnmower engine or something, and like a plastic. They've actually got one, and I'm like, I'm going to go pay the money to go to one of those. Just because I feel like it. But nice. just to get Dungeon Delver de-stressed, we got to get him out here to North Texas and take him over here. And during North Texas Con might be a good time to do it.
So one of the people who does game with us, she and her husband used to be organizers on the organizational team for the big Oshkosh Air Show, and
huge one,
one year, I don't know if they do this every year, but there's a guy who has travel videos on YouTube. He does different travel packages, and the particular one he did this weekend was he paid I think it was $1,500 to ride in the nose of one of two flying B-29s. So they basically they flew a brief route around, and so he got to sit in the Bombardier's nose seat in that B-29.
Honestly, even not getting shot at, I'm not sure I'd want to sit in that part. I was in the Army, and I was airborne, and I jumped. It's not. Without a parachute, I don't think I'm going to sit in that part of the airplane. I'm just telling you.
There's a pilot. 10 hours of flight time in a Cessna 172. Very nice.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think, but see, this is the part I think that people miss. Like my kids, when I take them to museums, and this is another thing that goes back to the topic we're on, the sort of rage thing, is I take my kids to museums, and I don't just take them to the science museum. I take them to art museums. I take them to others, which, when you're welcome. It's how I paid for college. So, one of the things that gets me is people go through these museums and they like sprint to the 5 things that are like the big name items in there. So like when I was in Paris at the Louvre, people did sprint over the Mona Lisa and sprint to 1 or 2 other things, and then they run away. And one of the things that as an experimental scientist you learn is there's a difference between looking and observing. You can look at something for a minute, but you haven't truly observed it. You haven't truly taken it in. You haven't truly understood it. So when I take my kids to these museums, we actually take a lot of time to sit there and go, okay, let's look at this picture, this painting, or this whatever it is. Why did the museum choose to put this here? Why did the museum choose this for the display? They could have chosen all kinds of things, especially up in DC. Those museums have all the money they ever care about. And my kids have gotten to the point where when we walk into a museum, they no longer roll their eyes, but they go in there. Like my daughter, who's all of 11, has gotten to the point where she now takes a notebook because she knows I'm going to ask questions on the way home. And she actually writes down her feelings in front of different paintings. And that's kind of the point to art, right? Is it's supposed to make you feel things. I like the rest of the museum too. And what got me about the Mona Lisa was, it was in one of his paintings, but if you walked around the corner, there were like 20 pages from his lab notebooks. I thought they were more cool. I thought they were cooler. The Da Vinci notebooks were just fantastic. But my daughter's gotten to the point where she takes notes and then she remembers how she feels in front of stuff. And I've actually caught her Googling these things later, and she's now really into kind of art. And even my sons have gotten into it. And, when it comes to let's go back to AI art, which people love to rage for a long time. My sons, who are 14 and turns 13 in 14 days, 2 weeks. Even they have figured out how to tell the difference between AI art and other art, and not all other art, because they have sometimes mistakenly flagged human stuff as AI stuff. But the thing they love about it is about certain art is it evokes emotion. It brings out a certain type of feeling in you. And because most people here are Dungeons and Dragons, there's art has changed over the years, and not all of it has, but this sort of thing, this is the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. It's neat. I like the cover. It's kind of cool. And some of the interior art is I like it, but it doesn't invoke the same emotion Trampier did. It just didn't. Right. And it's not that the new stuff is worse or better. Trampier had a way of capturing emotion that nobody else did. And I'm going to take some heat for this because people here are Dungeons and Dragons folks. My favorite artist was not a TSR artist. Okay, it just wasn't. Especially in the fantasy sense. Frank Frazetta was actually my favorite in the fantasy world, and I don't recall him ever doing anything for TSR. So I love TSR artwork, but Frank was the guy.
Early on, they wanted to hire Vallejo and Frazetta, and then they saw how much they charged.
Uh-huh.
And to put it in perspective, the art budget for original D&D, the amount of money that they allocated out was $50.
Frazetta wasn't going to work for that.
No, Frank Frazetta was not going to work for that. And by the way, you know what? I'm gonna take a moment here. I'm gonna shill. I'm gonna be a feckless shill for a minute. If you like Frank Frazetta, Tim, this guy here, I think I've talked to him about him before. Regis Malone. He is on Facebook. He is a student of Frazetta. Get his art books, dude.
I will do that. So I've got a bunch of the Vallejo art. I have my dad's old Tarzan books, and I think the cover of most of those are Vallejo art. At this when my dad was buying those. So Vallejo's another one of those big names that I would have just loved to have just had a chance to sit down and meet at one point. And it's like but if you look at the art that we produce now, some artists can get that emotion. Some artists can grab that feeling. But they're few and far between. And I think that's one of the brilliant things TSR did was they found 4 guys and later found more. But in the outset, they found those 4 guys, sort of the 4 horsemen of the art world, that grew into some of the best fantasy artists around. Larry Elmore, some others. Trampier, that grew into fantastic guys, but they identified that talent early and they allowed it a chance to foster. Modern companies don't do that. They find people who can produce it fast and quick, and they're not going to pay them top of mark, and they're not going to keep them for years while they develop. They just kind of get them in and out. But it, to me, I think we've kind of, not fostered that creativity the way we should. And that creativity is what produces the stuff we all remember. And that's one of the reasons, like I've written a couple of fiction books. They're really, aren't you afraid of AI art or AI fiction? I'm not, right? Because hopefully as a writer, I can evoke some kind of emotion, because like the books we all remember are the ones that actually cause you to think. And by and large, AI doesn't really do that. Like this one, I've been rereading this one recently. And I've got a few things on it, my YouTube channel. It's a book that really does make you think a lot. It's sci-fi about an apocalypse with a comet hitting you. But those are the sorts of things that humans can do that machines can't. So when we get people out there raging about AI, and we get people raging about whatever it is, that's fine. But I think you've missed the cart for the horse, right? I think you're saying, oh, it's going to destroy people's jobs. Well, sort of, or it's going to give companies a chance to go, hey, let's actually develop real artists now, and let's take the clip art, the fill-in stuff that we used to spend way too much time on, and let's go there, and let's have the real artists focus on the covers. Let's have the real artists take time doing those things we didn't used to have time for, because the fill-in stuff, the clip art can be done so much faster and cheaper. And I could be wrong, but yeah, the Terry Brooks, Shannara, another great example of fantastic artwork. That's exactly right. AI work. You can spot AI in a minute because it's either bad or it's AI, right? So humans and AI can produce about the same level, but not good artists, right? So, I've got a real, one of the artists that's not in the fantasy world that I always really liked was Salvador Dali. He was always creative, always unique, and it was always something new, right? And even writing prompts, I don't think you'd come up with something that was as creative as that guy was. So, who knows where it's all going to go? We'll see someday. But I think, so Cuba Kid, I did a video on my channel about this. AI generative art, there are a couple ways to use it that can be done without theft. You can either train it on a bunch of stuff that is absolutely so old, it is pure public domain, pure available for use. You take some of the 100, 200-year-old, 300-year-old art, feed that in as learning material. Or if you're somebody like Larry Elmore, if you're somebody like Trampier, who's no longer with us, and you fed your work into an AI and it gave you a first draft starting spot, and you use that to build from there, I think that's an interesting way to do it. But just saying, oh, let's just take every art that's ever produced and stick it in there as training material, that doesn't work for me. But can you train it in such a way that is both legal and ethical? And I had this argument on Twitter one day about somebody like, well, it's legal, so it's okay. I'm like, yeah, but it's legal, but is it ethical? And those are two entirely different questions. And I'd much rather have somebody doing it ethically than I would have them doing it illegally or legally. Well, we admit the law, right? Well, the law is not always ethical. Right, so let's try to find a way to do both. And AI art and AI writing, I'd love it if it was both. If it was ethical. Let's forget the legality for a minute, because law says you can kind of just feed it 20,000 images and doesn't give a shit where you gave them. But that's the law. That's not ethics. So,
very, very, very true. But speaking of Monterey, I had Errol Otis on back last April.
Great artist. Love his work.
Love Errol's work. He's so fun to talk to. Wait, was it last April? No, I think it was a little later. But anyway, you guys can check it out. Just look at my channel and look up look for Errol Otis, and you'll find it. But Errol said something. As I asked him, "What do you think about current D&D art?" And he said, "No, I think the artists are great. I think that the stuff is fine. And I express the idea that, and I agree with him. I think the artists are good, but I feel like they are fettered by what Wizards of the Coast wants, not what their artistic talent is. It wants what they want to create artistically. I mean, Darlene, the artist, has several beautiful illustrations that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. She did not create a single one of them on spec. She went to a gathering. She was invited to a TSR event with the chance of getting a job working at TSR. She brought her portfolio with her to show, and Gary flipped through all of the sample drawings that she had brought and said, yes, very nice, very good, very nice. Okay, I'll take them. I mean, and then they put them where they kind of thought they would like to have some nice art. It wasn't like, well, we need to spread it. This page is about potions, so give me a picture of an alchemist, working over a bench with Alembics, and that's what you do. And it's okay. Well, no, I want it. I want the alchemy lab darker. So give me, I want it looking more sinister. Okay, so you do that, but it was a bit more organic. The bringing of the art, and that is my my polemic about art is stuff that doesn't look so on spec.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Is you can get. I think the artist and somebody just said something about art in fifth edition. There's some great art in fifth edition, but you can tell the ones where they weren't crunched for time. Right. So some of the art that I think was done on spec was like, okay, I need a picture of this and I need it in X number of days. And that's some really small number. Right. And so great art is not done overnight. Good books are not written quickly. Right. So it takes time to produce this stuff. And I think some of the stuff that was produced on spec or done by committee is like you got 50 people who decided what the art's going to look like, 15 people in some committee inside Hasbro that decided it, or inside Wizards. And then you go to the artist, like, great, you got 2 days, go. Right. And there's no time. You got to crank something out. You got to get it done. And I think that was one of the things TSR was better at was they gave people time to produce good work. They gave them plenty of warning to produce good work. And the people they had working there were willing to work weekends, nights, holidays, whatever it took to produce good stuff, because the corporate culture was a lot different than it is at a big company like Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro now. So that culture was, we're all in this, they had this sort of, let's all work together kind of thing. And they didn't push their artists for massively impossible to meet deadlines. And you can really tell inside the current stuff when the deadlines were coming close and when they weren't. Because there is some great art in fifth edition. There's some that I've absolutely loved. And then there's some that just looks like sort of glorified clip art.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I will mention one thing, and I promise I'm not going. I'm actually Tim, but Tracy Lesh, who's been on the show several times, awesome dude. Tracy was one of the OD&D artists. He was actually the first to have his back up against a deadline because Gary wanted the original version of Tomb of Horrors. He for his tournament copy that he would play with people. He wanted all of the illustrations. It was like 28 illustrations done in 24 days. So Tracy had to your 17-year-old Tracy with pen and ink. Like, okay,
go.
Here's the module text. Draw this stuff. So
and this is the space you got, right?
Yeah, exactly. Tracy was under the gun that one time, but he did make it happen. But no, I think by and large, the vibe I've gotten from TSR artists that I've talked to, and there are many, again, Tracy, Errol Otis, Darlene, Dave LaForce, they've all been on the show, and they all kind of had that almost jam session vibe. I think that's what you're talking about, Tim, is a jam session vibe to how things went.
You get talented people in a room, you say you've got some time, you see what comes out the other end. And, sometimes it's fantastic. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get enough talent in enough space and you get the traveling Wilburys. Other times you get a bunch of talent in the same space and you get like a disaster, like has happened at certain rock festivals on occasion. Because you get these two talented bands who are just, let's go out and try something. Well, it doesn't really work out that well. And then sometimes you get the traveling Wilburys where it worked amazingly well.
Just a quick answer. James Seymour wasn't Errol's first published work in Arduin. I think so. I have a vague recollection that he said he might have done something. Do not quote me on this. Do not run off and say, I said this as fact, because I'm not saying it as fact. I have a vague recollection that he did like illustrations for Punk Musician cassettes, like literally like each one drawn, not like did one photocopied and put, but I could be wrong about that. I guess we'll just have to have Errol on the show again to find out whether or not I am having a brain fart or what. But so I guess to bring it back around, Tim, have we fixed anything?
No, but I feel better.
I do. This was kind of the anti-rage bait stream. And I look, I apologize. Yes, it was a wind up. Tim and I deliberately went for the hyper emotional kind of things. But I think it's important to keep in perspective that rage is jet fuel, and it will burn like that, and then it's gone, and it'll only carry you so far, and continued use of it will burn you up. And this channel is not going to be like that. And I just based on what I've seen on Tim's channel is not going to be like that.
I'm by and large not an angry guy, so I consider myself quite lucky in life, and I try not to be angry. I save it for when it matters, and and when it matters, I might point out to people like Kabuki Kid and others that if I'm going to be angry and if I'm going to go vent that rage, I'm going to do it in a Metallica concert, right? And if you follow me on Twitter, I pointed out recently that AC/DC is going back on tour, and I don't care if it's basically Angus Young and friends now. I'm going to an AC/DC concert if they come anywhere close to me. Wearing a D20s hat. I actually have a hat I considered wearing that I put on for my kids. I have this hat that I got at Six Flags that is a poop hat emoji, but it's got a bull face on it and horns, so my kids call it the bullshit hat. And I make them wear it when they're feeding me a line of crap, and I know it's a line of crap, and then they get to wear the hat for a few hours. So that's my version of punishing teenagers instead of grounding them, because grounding them does no good. They make my life more miserable than I made theirs. But wearing the bullshit hat and me taking pictures of it, now that's worthwhile. So that's my favorite hat in the house. But yeah, it looks like I'm wearing a D20, but
it's a good look. It's a good look. But the admonition that I would give to you guys, and I think I think we've covered all the bases here, Tim. But if there's anything, again, I of course feel free to jump in. But the admonition that I would give to you guys is, and this is anybody, this is Tim, this is you guys out in the audience, this is if you're watching this down the road and you haven't clicked subscribe, please do click subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications. Yes, I got the call to action in there. What can I say? But if you see bullshit, don't run off and do a rage react video, particularly if it's bullshit on this channel. Call me out on it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have a reason.
Speaking from my day job perspective, it's actually going to downgrade your account as far as credibility. Most of the platforms are now looking for things that get blocked or reported. And if you rage enough, one of those two things is going to happen, and your placement on timeline is going to suck. I see it all the time on X. There's John Cusack, who I'm a fan of his acting, but his X account, he loves to just stir up crap. And he's got 1.5 million followers, and sometimes his tweets are only seen by like 10,000 people because he tweets stuff that's purposely making people mad, and he gets blocked and he gets reported, so he gets downgraded in the timelines. So it to me, you're only hurting yourself, right? Your posts are going to be seen far less often if you do that kind of stuff, because the result is going to take place. And yes, I know it's bullshit, more shit, and piled higher and deeper. But here's my thing. I joined the Army, and that's how I paid for undergrad. And my grad school was all in stipends, and I worked my ass off. So I graduated with, I think, a total of $12,000 in student loan debt. So I worked my butt off. What can I say? So,
well, I mean,
avoided loans.
as far as getting pushed down by getting pushed down by the algorithm or whatever. I mean, I had 1,500 followers before I started doing rage stuff. I've got 5,600 and something followers now. Yes, thousands of those were because of Wizards of the Coast outrage. I think Wizards of the Coast is going to do enough stuff for me to react to that I'm not going to have to worry about content. But I don't have to go chasing rage, and maybe that means I'll have just a continually slower growth. Like I'm never going to have that go to sleep with 1,500, wake up with 5,000 again moment. But I can live with that. I can live with that, knowing that I'm bringing quality content instead of bitter cotton candy. But I do want to answer Patty's question. Some people can't tolerate being called out. What would I suggest? Let me tell you something. When I first got out on the internet in 1989, the first thing the guy that worked for the bulletin board, or the guy that owned the bulletin board system that I worked for when we got Usenet, told me about was kill files. And basically, Usenet was a worldwide message board. Tim knows what Usenet is. I know a lot of you guys probably do, but it was a worldwide internet propagated message board. The archives of it still exist on Google. It technically still exists, but it's kind of useless now. But one of the most awesome things in the world that he taught me how to use was the kill file. You don't want to see somebody's post? Add their user ID to the kill file. It doesn't even download to your machine.
Yeah.
They're anything they have to say from that point forward is automatically blocked. Okay. And people who are like, I never block anyone, that's cowardice, blah, blah, blah. Guys, I don't have enough hours in the day to suffer the people that I have blocked, and I will do it just like that. Not because I'm weak and not because I don't want to hear a dissenting opinion. I want to hear dissenting opinions. I want people to call me out on my bullshit. I think we all want an honest call out on your bullshit. But if all you want to do is scream at me.
I'm the same way. It's like, if I have no qualms over blocking somebody who's not willing to engage in a rational discussion. If you just want to scream at me and say, oh, you have to see it my way or else is like a keyword my ex-wife used to use. It's like, do this or else. Like, great. Or else, block, no longer in my world. Yeah. I had one person who was like, well, I'm going to unfollow you unless you agree with me. I'm like, I've got 12,000 followers. Go ahead. I don't care.
Yeah.
What's one going to do? Right. Oh, my world is coming to an end. I'm going to have to stay. Okay, fine.
I don't care if you've got 12 followers.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to suffer bullshit. And that's what I recommend.
So
just put people on an ignore, block, do not see list, and your life is better.
So I've been saving this one, and I was going to throw this out to whoever in your audience wants to do it, and to you as well, Bill. I ordered there's Slaying the Dragon. There's a few other TSR history books out there, and I've read or have all of them, or I've at least used them as references and looked stuff up. My plan is, as soon as I finish reading the book I'm reading now, is to go through and start reading those again chapter by chapter and sort of doing videos about them. But I think in some cases, and I'm not being critical of anyone, but I think in some cases we have idealized the TSR decision making and said, oh, they got screwed over by X, Y, or Z. And I think those history books show that, yes, there was some fantastic creative stuff that went on. There were also some blundering business decisions that they made that, had they not made, probably could have still had TSR as TSR to this day. Because I don't think Gary would have ever sold out unless he was forced out. So what I'm going to do is go through those a little bit more carefully, because for those of you that don't know, I left the university. I work in sort of the startup space now. And yes, I'm a scientist, but I understand business at least well enough to be conversational about it. And anybody who'd like to, as I go through those, I'd love to discuss that history. And with hindsight, what might have been done better to keep TSR as the juggernaut that it could have been, and have it been able to buy out Magic the Gathering and become sort of that bigger space. But as it was, it had all kinds of financial problems, and if Wizards hadn't taken it over, it would have just died on the grapevine. So, that is my plan, is to go through those and discuss that history, but also look at it from the perspective of what could we have done better here? What can we learn from history so that the next role-playing game company doesn't make those same mistakes? Because I see a lot of startups and I see a lot of people in the RPG space, and I have people ask me all the time, it's like, oh, would you want to get involved with this one or that one? Or, investors, and maybe you can help out. If you're not running these things like a business and you're running it like a creative entity, like, oh, I want the artists to be able to play, you can't do that. You've got to run these things as a business. So I'd love to go through that history with somebody like you, Bill, or others, and not a video a day, maybe one a week, and say, look, here's what happened. What could have gone better? Right. Those sorts of things.
To that, we are getting down into some ultra fine detail specifics, but to that, I got to say, I got to get you in the same room with Paul Stormberg then.
All right.
I got to connect you with Paul. I'm a big fan of Paul Stormberg. We have him on the show. He's going to be on the show soon because there's a little something happening in Lake Geneva that D&D fans should all be able to rally around. The Gygax Memorial Kickstarter is going to begin soon, and Paul's gonna talk all about that the next time he's on the show. But I have said too much already.
And Raven, that's my exact point, is Wizards of the Coast, without realizing it, is making some of the very same shit mistakes that TSR made, and it's going to cost them in the long run. Now, luckily, they have the mothership called Hasbro that can throw cash at them if it needs to, but whether or not they will is another question. Right, so.
Yeah, it's almost like those who refuse to remember history are condemned to repeat it. But that's crazy. That
never happened.
Well, Tim, I apologize for the audio issues that kneecapped me earlier today. Blame Duke Energy, Florida Power and Light, whoever you want to. But thank you so much for coming on. And guys, it was Tim's brilliant idea to do the "we're finished, we can't do this anymore" approach to the video. So if that got you looking good,
blame me. I don't care. It's
nah. But it's always fun having you on here. And of course, I'll show up on your channel and you'll show up here, and you guys can watch Tarth Knows Rage Against the Dying of the Light every Tuesday.
Hey, I'm back up to full hit points now. We can go off and be completely careless.
Right, exactly. So that means I can start throwing the hill giants at you guys any day now, right?
Well, you see, what I meant was, please be nice. I do have a T-shirt I'm wearing on Tuesday, though, that says, "When the DM smiles, it's already too late."
I can't wait to see it. And I can't wait to see you folks here. Again, thank you everybody for showing up today. There was such an outpouring of generosity today. I got to thank Wenger, Ricky Maru, Thane Kyle, Mark Morrison, Vaughn Gifford, Jimmy Invictus for the super chats. It helps keep the lights on, guys. I really do appreciate it. But James Seymour says, "I want to purchase full rights to Kender so I can burn the material." Hey, come on. I'm a softie. I wouldn't do that. I
love Kender. I think they're great. Played correctly, they're fantastic.
Forget about them. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and roll the closing credits here, which I have to do manually because my Stream Deck crashed and I still haven't got it working. But anyhow, thank you everybody for being here. It was wonderful to see you all on a Sunday. Sorry for missing Friday. It was just one of those things, Peace, everybody. Have a lovely day.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing,